Lexi was the picture of perfection. A woman in her mid-30s, married to Thomas, a successful lawyer. They lived in a luxurious suburban home, complete with perfectly manicured lawns, designer furniture, and the kind of life that others envied from the outside. But beneath the surface, Lexi's marriage to Thomas had long lost its passion. While they looked like the ideal couple, their emotional distance had been growing for years. Lexi craved excitement, something to break the monotony of her daily life. Her escape became the gym, where she pushed her body to its limits to distract herself from the loneliness she felt at home. It was during these gym sessions that she met Sarah, a personal trainer in her late 20s who radiated confidence and charm. Sarah was the opposite of everything Lexi knew, bold, athletic, and unabashedly flirtatious. With her short, cropped hair, numerous tattoos, and piercing green eyes, she was magnetic. During their sessions, Lexi found herself drawn to Sarah in ways that confused her. What started as admiration for Sarah's strength and intensity soon evolved into something more. Lexi, who had never before considered herself anything but straight, found herself eagerly anticipating each session, her mind racing with thoughts she had never allowed herself to have. Sarah, ever the provocateur, noticed Lexi's lingering stares and coy smiles. She responded with teasing touches. A hand on Lexi's lower back as she adjusted her form. A wink when she caught Lexi's eyes in the mirror. It wasn't long before those innocent touches turned into something much more dangerous. One evening, after an exhausting session of high-intensity interval training, Sarah suggested they finish the day with a sauna. Lexi agreed, eager to prolong her time with the trainer who had become more than just a coach. The gym was closing soon and they were the only ones left. Inside the sauna, the atmosphere shifted. The heat, the seclusion, and the dim lighting made Lexi feel both vulnerable and excited. As the steam enveloped them, Lexi could feel her heart pounding, though not from the workout. She watched as Sarah leaned back against the bench, her eyes locked on Lexi's. They spoke in hushed tones, their conversation laced with unspoken tension. Sarah subtly complimented Lexi's physique, telling her how much she had progressed, how strong she had become. The words were innocuous, but the way she said them, the way her eyes lingered on Lexi's body, made them anything. But before Lexi could fully process what was happening, Sarah was beside her, their thighs touching. Lexi's breath caught in her throat as Sarah leaned in, her lips brushing against Lexi's ear as she whispered, "You know you want this." It wasn't a question. Lexi, feeling a rush of adrenaline, kissed her. The kiss was intense, filled with a passion Lexi hadn't felt in years. Sarah responded in kind, pulling Lexi closer, her hands roaming. The boundaries that once separated trainer and client were completely obliterated. In that sauna, Lexi crossed a line she could never uncross. In the weeks that followed, Lexi and Sarah's relationship escalated. Their gym sessions became more about stolen moments of intimacy than working out. They would sneak into the locker rooms, sharing secret touches and kisses, always on edge, fearing they would be caught. Sarah had an intoxicating effect on Lexi. With Sarah, she felt liberated, rebellious even. It wasn't just about sex. It was about escaping the confines of her life, about feeling desired in a way Thomas hadn't made her feel in years. Sarah brought out a wild side in Lexi, one she had never known existed. But what Lexi didn't know was that Sarah was already in a relationship, a long-term and tumultuous one with Vanessa. Vanessa was Sarah's live-in partner, and while their relationship had its ups and downs, they were deeply intertwined. Sarah's affair with Lexi wasn't just a fling. It was a reckless act that would soon have devastating consequences for everyone involved. Vanessa was fiercely protective of Sarah. Their relationship had weathered numerous storms. But Vanessa always suspected that Sarah's wild side would eventually lead her into trouble. Lately, Vanessa had noticed a change in Sarah. She was coming home late, avoiding eye contact, and there were secretive texts on her phone that she wouldn't let Vanessa see. Vanessa had always known Sarah was flirtatious by nature, but this felt different. Sarah's attention was divided and her absences grew more frequent. Vanessa, whose own insecurities often got the best of her, began to grow suspicious. One night after Sarah came home later than usual, Vanessa checked Sarah's phone while she was asleep. That's when she found the messages. Explicit texts from Lexi, plans for late-night rendezvous, pictures that left no doubt about what had been going on. Vanessa's blood boiled. She felt the sting of betrayal. But more than that, she felt an uncontrollable rage building inside her. She loved Sarah deeply, and the thought of losing her to some bored housewife was unbearable. But Vanessa wasn't just hurt. She was calculating. She wasn't going to let Lexi walk away from this unscathed. If Lexi thought she could take Sarah from her, she had another thing coming. Vanessa's mind raced as she began to plot her revenge. As the affair continued, Lexi's behavior at home began to change. She became distant, emotionally unavailable to Thomas. The guilt of her secret life weighed on her, but not enough to make her stop. She couldn't get enough of Sarah, even though she knew she was playing with fire. Thomas, meanwhile, noticed the shift in his wife. He wasn't blind to the late-night gym sessions, the sudden increase in Lexi's workout routines, or the way she seemed detached during their once-monthly date nights. Their sex life, already strained, had become non-existent. He tried to brush it off as just a phase, but a nagging feeling at the back of his mind told him something wasn't right. One evening, after Lexi came home from another secret meeting with Sarah, Thomas confronted her. He asked if there was someone else. Lexi, unprepared for the confrontation, lied. She told him she was just stressed from work, that she was spending more time at the gym to unwind. Thomas didn't push her further, but his suspicions only grew. Little did Lexi know Thomas had already begun taking steps of his own to uncover the truth. Vanessa was a master of manipulation. She bided her time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She didn't confront Sarah directly. Instead, she let her girlfriend continue her affair, knowing it would only make Lexi more vulnerable. Vanessa started shadowing Lexi's routine, figuring out when she would be at the gym, where she went afterward, and what her weaknesses were. Vanessa knew that a direct confrontation would be too messy. She needed to catch Lexi off guard to hit her where it hurt the most. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about making Lexi pay. Vanessa began working late at the gym under the guise of filling in for Sarah, watching Lexi from the shadows. The opportunity presented itself one evening when Sarah had to attend a fitness conference out of town. Vanessa seized her chance. She took Sarah's phone and sent Lexi a seductive message, inviting her to the gym after hours for a private session. Lexi, believing the message to be from Sarah, eagerly agreed. Lexi arrived at the gym later that night, her heart racing with excitement. She thought she was about to indulge in another secret rendezvous with Sarah. The gym was dark, the lights dimmed, and the air felt thick with anticipation. She walked into the weight room, calling out Sarah's name, but there was no response. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. Lexi spun around, her pulse quickening as she saw Vanessa step out from the shadows, her eyes burning with a cold fury. "I bet you didn't expect to see me," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with venom. Lexi froze, her mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. She had seen Vanessa at the gym before, but had no idea about her connection to Sarah. Now the truth hit her like a freight train. Vanessa's face twisted into a malicious smile as she stepped closer, trapping Lexi in the gym. "You really thought you could take her from me, didn't you?" Vanessa's voice was low, almost a growl. "You thought you could have her. Destroy my life and walk away." Panic coursed through Lexi's veins. She tried to back away, but Vanessa's presence was overpowering. There was a terrifying calmness in her demeanor, an indication that she had been planning this moment for a long time. "You have no idea what you've done," Vanessa whispered, her eyes locking onto Lexi's with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. "You're going to regret every second of this." Before Lexi could react, Vanessa lunged at her with a sudden, terrifying force. Lexi stumbled backward, her hands instinctively coming up to protect herself. But Vanessa was relentless. She swung her fist, catching Lexi on the side of the face, the impact sending her crashing into a row of dumbbells. The sound of metal clanging against the floor echoed through the empty gym as Lexi cried out in pain. "You think you can just steal what's mine and walk away?" Vanessa snarled, her voice filled with fury. She grabbed Lexi by the front of her shirt and yanked her to her feet, her eyes wild with rage. Lexi's head spun, the room tilting as she tried to steady herself. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth and her heart raced with fear. "Please, Vanessa, you don't understand," Lexi stammered, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Vanessa's eyes flashed with cold amusement. Didn't mean for this to happen, she repeated mockingly. You didn't mean to sleep with my girlfriend behind my back. Lexi's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out, but there was no reasoning with Vanessa. She could see it in her eyes. This wasn't just about revenge. Vanessa was out for blood. Lexi's entire body shook as she tried to back away, but Vanessa grabbed a nearby kettlebell and swung it, hitting Lexi in the side. The pain was immediate and intense. Knocking the wind out of her as she collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, Vanessa stood over her, her chest heaving with adrenaline. You ruined my life, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Now I'm going to ruin yours. Lexi lay on the cold gym floor, her body aching from the vicious attack. Every breath was painful, and she could taste blood in her mouth. Vanessa paced in front of her, gripping the kettlebell tightly in her hands. Her knuckles white. Lexi knew she had to get out of there, but her body felt weak, her limbs heavy from the beating she had taken. In a moment of desperation, Lexi tried to crawl away, her palms scraping against the rough floor. She made it a few feet before Vanessa grabbed her by the ankle and dragged her back. Lexi let out a scream, her nails clawing at the floor as she tried to escape. Where do you think you're going? Vanessa hissed, her voice low and dangerous. She yanked Lexi to her feet, slamming her against the wall of mirrors that lined the gym. The glass rattled behind her, and Lexi's vision blurred as she struggled to stay conscious. You're pathetic, Vanessa spat, leaning in close. All this time, you thought you could play with my life, with Sarah's life, and there wouldn't be consequences. Lexi's breath came in shallow gasps. She could barely keep her eyes open, her mind racing with panic. She had never been in a fight like this before, never been faced with such raw, violent anger. She wasn't sure how much more she could take. Her body ached, her vision swam, and the bitter taste of blood filled her mouth. I'm sorry, Lexi whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry, Vanessa. But Vanessa wasn't interested in apologies. Her grip tightened around Lexi's neck, her eyes blazing with a cold, ruthless intensity. You're going to be a lot sorrier before I'm done with you. Vanessa's fury was cold and calculated, a stark contrast to Lexi's desperate terror. As Vanessa stared down at her, panting heavily from the exertion, she realized she had reached a point of no return. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was an execution, one that Vanessa had been planning for weeks. I've been watching you, Vanessa said, her voice eerie in its calmness. I've followed you. Learned your routine. Did you think I wouldn't find out about you and Sarah? Lexi, barely able to focus, tried to speak, but Vanessa silenced her with a sharp slap to the face. No more lies. You've already done enough damage. Vanessa's mind flashed back to the moment she had discovered the affair, how she had felt the world collapse beneath her. But that hurt had festered into something darker, something deadly. She had planned this meticulously, down to the last detail. She had lured Lexi here, knowing no one would come to her aid. The gym was deserted, the security cameras conveniently disabled. No one would know what had happened until it was too late. I thought about making it quick, Vanessa admitted, pacing in front of Lexi. But that would be too easy. You deserve to feel every bit of pain you've caused. Lexi's survival instincts kicked in, despite the overwhelming fear that gripped her. She knew that if she didn't fight back now, Vanessa would kill her. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Lexi waited for a moment when Vanessa's attention wavered. When Vanessa turned to grab a set of weights, Lexi lunged, shoving Vanessa with all her might. Vanessa stumbled backward, caught off guard, and Lexi sprinted toward the exit, her legs shaky and her vision still blurred from the attack. Her heart pounded in her chest as she grabbed for the door handle, praying it wasn't locked. But just as her fingers brushed the cold metal, Vanessa grabbed her from behind, yanking her backward. The two women fell to the floor, grappling with each other in a fierce struggle. Lexi kicked and scratched, her nails digging into Vanessa's arms as she fought to break free. Vanessa, fueled by rage, swung her fist, hitting Lexi squarely in the jaw. The impact sent a shock of pain through Lexi's body, but she refused to give up. She couldn't. The gym was eerily silent. The only sounds were their labored breathing and the scuffle of their bodies as they fought. Lexi's mind raced, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Her eyes landed on a nearby barbell, and she reached for it desperately. But Vanessa was quicker. She grabbed Lexi by the hair, slamming her head against the floor with brutal force. Stars exploded in Lexi's vision, and she cried out in pain. She was losing, her body too battered, too weak to continue. Vanessa loomed over her, victorious. Her lips curling into a sinister smile, Vanessa stood over Lexi's limp body, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling with adrenaline. The sight of Lexi sprawled on the floor, defeated and broken, filled Vanessa with a sense of satisfaction. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. "You're not leaving here alive," Vanessa said, her voice eerily calm as she lifted the barbell Lexi had tried to reach. "But I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything first." Lexi's vision blurred, but she could see the cold determination in Vanessa's eyes. She tried to crawl away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The pain was too much. Her strength depleted. Vanessa raised the barbell above her head, her hands trembling with the effort. She hesitated for a moment, savoring the fear in Lexi's eyes. "Say goodbye, Lexi." With a sickening thud, Vanessa brought the barbell down. The sound of metal hitting flesh and bone echoed through the empty gym. Followed by a sickening crunch, blood splattered across the floor and Lexi's body went still. Vanessa stood there for a moment, panting, staring down at the gruesome scene she had created. She had done it. Lexi was dead. The woman who had taken everything from her was gone. And yet the satisfaction she had expected didn't come. All that remained was a hollow emptiness, a void that couldn't be filled. Vanessa's hands trembled as she looked down at Lexi's lifeless body. The gym was quiet, eerily still, and the reality of what she had done began to sink in. Panic started to creep in as she realized the magnitude of her actions. She had killed someone, murdered her in cold blood. There was no turning back. Now her mind raced, searching for a way out. She needed to cover her tracks, make sure no one knew she had been here. Vanessa grabbed a towel from a nearby bench and wiped down everything she had touched, erasing any fingerprints or evidence of her presence. She dragged Lexi's body toward the weight machines, positioning it to make it look like a tragic accident, a weightlifting missile. Blood still pooled on the floor, and Vanessa's heart pounded as she tried to clean it up. She worked quickly, wiping away the blood with a towel, her hands shaking the entire time. Her thoughts raced, filled with fear and adrenaline. She needed to get out of there before anyone discovered what had happened. Once she was satisfied that the scene looked like an accident, Vanessa slipped out of the gym, locking the door behind her. The cold night air hit her like a slap to the face, and she breathed deeply. Trying to calm her racing heart, she had done it. Vanessa's mind raced as she walked away from the gym, her pulse still pounding in her ears. She had cleaned the scene as best as she could, but the reality of what she had done hung heavily in the air. Every step felt like an eternity, her legs shaky beneath her as the adrenaline began to wear off. The magnitude of her actions was starting to sink in. The night was cold, and Vanessa zipped up her hoodie. Keeping her head low as she made her way to her car parked a few blocks away, she had chosen to park far enough to avoid the gym security cameras. Vanessa wasn't naive. She knew the cameras at the entrance could still be a problem, but she was banking on her careful planning. She'd worn gloves, wiped down the equipment, and left no visible trace behind. Sliding into the driver's seat, Vanessa sat for a moment in the silence of the car. Her hands were still trembling as she gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly at the dashboard. She had thought this would feel like a victory, that taking revenge on Lexi would bring some kind of closure. But now the weight of her actions bore down on her like a suffocating blanket. She had killed someone, ended a life. There was no undoing that. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. There was no time for second-guessing. Now she needed to focus on what came next. There were things she had to do, alibis to establish, loose ends to tie up. Vanessa started the car and drove through the quiet suburban streets, replaying the events of the night over and over in her mind. She needed to be meticulous now, more than ever. She had to make sure no one connected her to Lexi's death. Meanwhile, Sarah had been completely unaware of the storm brewing behind her back. She had spent the last few days at the fitness conference, networking with other trainers and taking workshops on the latest fitness trends. The trip had been a welcome distraction for her. An escape from the complicated web she had spun with Lexi and Vanessa. When she returned home late that night, exhausted from the trip, she found the apartment quiet. Vanessa wasn't home, which wasn't entirely unusual. Vanessa had a habit of staying late at the gym to work on her own routines. But there was something about the silence that unsettled Sarah. She checked her phone and saw that Vanessa hadn't left any messages, which was odd after a quick shower. Sarah collapsed on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She had planned to meet Lexi the next day after she returned, but there were no messages from her either. Sarah was about to text Lexi when a sudden unease washed over her. Something didn't feel right. She dialed Lexi's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. Sarah frowned and tried again, but there was still no answer. Her gut twisted. Lexi was usually quick to respond. Maybe she was just asleep, Sarah thought, trying to shake the uneasy feeling, gnawing at her insides. But the nagging sense of dread wouldn't go away. The next morning, Thomas woke early, as he always did. He had a busy day ahead at the firm, with back-to-back meetings and a presentation to finalize. But as he moved through the house, something felt off. Lexi hadn't come home the night before, and her side of the bed was untouched. He had been suspicious for weeks now. Ever since Lexi's sudden obsession with the gym, at first he had believed her story about wanting to get in better shape, but the late nights, the distant attitude, and the evasive answers had set off alarms. He wasn't a fool. He had been married to Lexi long enough to know when something was wrong. He had tried to ignore the signs, tried to convince himself that it was just a phase, but now, standing in their empty bedroom, Thomas couldn't shake the sick feeling in his stomach. He decided to check the gym. The place Lexi had been spending all her time recently. Maybe she had stayed late for a workout and forgotten to come home, though that thought didn't sit right with him either. When Thomas arrived at the gym, the parking lot was almost empty. It was still early and only a few regulars were trickling in for their morning sessions. He pushed open the door and immediately noticed something strange. The gym was eerily quiet and the usual front desk staff was nowhere to be seen. Thomas walked further in, calling Lexi's name. His voice echoed in the stillness, but there was no response. He made his way to the weight room, where Lexi had spent most of her time lately. What he saw next stopped him cold. Lexi's body lay sprawled beneath the weight machines, a pool of blood congealing on the floor around her head. Thomas's heart slammed in his chest, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment, he stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. Then the scream tore from his throat. A sound of raw, unimaginable horror. The police arrived at the gym within minutes of Thomas's frantic 911 call. The crime scene was immediately secured and detectives began their work, surveying the room with grim faces. The sight of Lexi's lifeless body, the blood-stained floor, and the weight machines painted a gruesome picture. At first glance, it appeared to be a tragic accident, a weightlifting mishap. But the more the detectives looked, the less the scene made sense. The blood patterns, the way Lexi's body was positioned. It didn't quite add up to an accidental death. And then there was the absence of any recent gym activity on the machines. Something wasn't right. Detective Jenna Torres, a seasoned investigator with a sharp eye for detail, knelt beside Lexi's body, studying the scene carefully. She noticed the faint bruises on Lexi's wrists and arms. Inconsistent with the type of accident they were looking at, something about this felt off, and her instincts told her that this was no accident. "We need to canvass the area," Torres said to her partner, Detective Mike Donovan. "Check the security cameras. Interview everyone who was here last night." The gym's manager handed over the security footage, but as the detectives reviewed it, they noticed something odd. The cameras at the gym's entrance had mysteriously cut out for a few hours last night. Right around the time Lexi had likely been killed, it was too convenient to be a coincidence. Torres's gut twisted with suspicion. This wasn't just a tragic gym accident. This was a murder. Back at home, Vanessa was on edge. She hadn't heard anything yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time before Lexi's body would be discovered. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leaped into her throat, fearing it was Sarah, or worse, the police. The guilt and paranoia were beginning to gnaw at her. She had cleaned the scene as best as she could, made it look like an accident, but doubt was creeping in. Had she missed something? Were there fingerprints she hadn't wiped away? A camera she hadn't accounted for? Vanessa couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every sound outside her window made her jump. She tried to act normal around Sarah, but the tension was too much. Sarah had noticed her distant behavior and had asked her several times what was wrong, but Vanessa brushed it off, claiming she was just stressed from work. Sarah didn't push, but Vanessa could feel her girlfriend's suspicion growing. As days passed, Vanessa found herself watching the news obsessively, waiting for any report about Lexi's death. She scrolled through social media, trying to gauge if anyone had started piecing things together. But the more time passed, the heavier the silence became. She had expected some kind of release after taking her revenge, but all she felt was the crushing weight of her actions. Sarah came home one evening, unusually quiet. She had been working at the gym earlier that day when news of Lexi's death finally broke. The whispers among the gym staff had been chilling, how they found her body in the weight room, the police investigation underway. Sarah's heart had dropped into her stomach when she heard Lexi's name. The woman she had been having an affair with was dead. She hadn't told Vanessa anything yet. She didn't know how, but as she sat across from her that evening, eating dinner in tense silence, Sarah could sense that something was wrong with Vanessa, too. "Have you heard about what happened at the gym?" Sarah asked, her voice careful. Vanessa's fork froze in midair, her heart skipping a beat. "No." "What happened?" "They found a woman dead in the weight room," Sarah said, watching Vanessa closely. "It was Lexi." Vanessa felt her blood run cold for a moment. She thought she might faint. "That's awful," she managed to say, her voice shaky. "An accident." Sarah nodded slowly, but her eyes were sharp, probing. "The police are saying it was a weightlifting accident, but it doesn't sit right with me." Vanessa felt the walls closing in. Sarah was too close, too smart. She couldn't know the truth. Not now, not ever. Detective Torres had been relentless in her investigation. The gym's footage, though initially seeming to confirm an accidental death, had sparked her suspicion. The missing hours and the peculiarities in the crime scene suggested that there was more to this case. Torres knew that if she wanted to solve this mystery, she needed to dig deeper. She began by interviewing gym employees and anyone who might have been around the area during the time of the incident. The gym staff described Vanessa as a frequent presence, dedicated and seemingly focused on her training. They all agreed that she had been seen late into the night, but no one had seen her leave. Torres and Donovan visited Vanessa's apartment to conduct a formal interview. Vanessa greeted them with a tense smile, her face a mask of concern. "Detectives, I'm so sorry to hear about Lexi," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I knew her well. She was always so dedicated to her fitness." Torres scrutinized Vanessa's body language, noting the way she avoided eye contact and fidgeted with her hands. "We're trying to piece together what happened," Torres said. "Can you tell us where you were the night Lexi died?" Vanessa's mind raced as she tried to keep her composure. "I was at the gym," she said, her voice steady but guarded. "I stayed late to work on some new routines. I left around midnight." Torres nodded, jotting down notes. "And did you notice anything unusual? Any strangers or anything out of the ordinary?" Vanessa shook her head. "No, it was just me and a few regulars. Everything seemed normal." Torres observed Vanessa closely, noticing the beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Despite the cool indoor temperature, she sensed that Vanessa was hiding something but had no concrete evidence to push further. "Thank you for your time. We may have more questions later." As the detectives left, Vanessa's relief was palpable, but it was short-lived. The pressure of the investigation was mounting and she could feel the net tightening around her. She had to be careful. One misstep could expose everything. Sarah's unease grew with each passing day. The news about Lexi's death had unsettled her deeply, but it was Vanessa's increasingly erratic behavior that troubled her the most. Vanessa seemed to be hiding something, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. One evening, while Vanessa was out for a late-night workout, Sarah decided to investigate. She began by searching through Vanessa's belongings, hoping to find some clue about what had happened. Her heart pounded as she rifled through drawers. checking for anything that might explain Vanessa's strange behavior. In Vanessa's desk, Sarah found a folder marked gym stuff. Inside, she discovered a series of documents and notes, none of which made sense at first. There were lists of names, workout schedules, and some scribbled notes about Lexi. The most disturbing part was a document detailing a confrontation with Lexi, including a list of things Vanessa intended to settle. Sarah's hands shook as she read through the notes. It was clear that Vanessa had been deeply involved with Lexi's death, though the exact nature of their relationship and what had happened that night remained unclear. The chilling realization struck Sarah. Vanessa had been planning something far more sinister than just a confrontation. When Vanessa came home that night, Sarah confronted her with the evidence she had found. Her voice was steady, but filled with anger. "Vanessa, what is all this? Why are there notes about Lexi in your desk?" Vanessa's face turned pale. As she tried to compose herself, "Sarah, it's not what it looks like. I was just trying to understand what happened." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Understand? Vanessa, I don't believe you. What's really going on?" Vanessa's facade began to crumble. The guilt and fear that had been simmering beneath the surface now erupted. "I'm sorry," Vanessa said, her voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this to happen with Sarah's confrontation." Vanessa's carefully constructed world began to unravel. As Sarah dug deeper, she uncovered more incriminating evidence that pointed to Vanessa's involvement in Lexi's death. Sarah felt a mix of betrayal and horror, realizing the depth of Vanessa's deception and violence. Desperate to protect herself and seeking justice for Lexi, Sarah contacted Detective Torres. She provided the evidence she had found and detailed her suspicions about Vanessa's involvement. Torres was taken aback by the gravity of the situation, but immediately recognized the importance of the new information. The detective and her team returned to Vanessa's apartment for a more thorough search. They found additional evidence, blood-stained clothes and a broken security camera pointing to Vanessa's guilt. The evidence was damning, and it became clear that Vanessa had planned and executed Lexi's murder. As Vanessa was arrested and taken into custody, she was consumed by a whirlwind of emotions: fear, anger, and regret. The reality of her situation hit her hard. The life she had once known was gone, replaced by the harsh consequences of her actions. In a somber twist of fate, Vanessa was charged with murder. The case shocked the community in the gym, once a place of health and fitness, was now a symbol of betrayal and violence. The media frenzy that followed was intense, with reporters covering every detail of the tragic story. The trial was a media spectacle, with Vanessa's story capturing the public's attention. The courtroom was filled with spectators, journalists, and those who had been affected by the tragic events. Sarah testified, her voice filled with pain and resolve as she recounted her relationship with Lexi and her discovery of Vanessa's incriminating evidence. Vanessa, on the other hand, was a shadow of her former self. The once confident personal trainer now appeared frail and broken, her face lined with remorse. The trial revealed the full extent of her actions, and the details of Lexi's murder were laid bare for the world to see. The prosecution presented a strong case, using the evidence and Sarah's testimony to paint a clear picture of Vanessa's guilt. The defense tried to argue that Vanessa had been driven to her actions by emotional turmoil, but the jury was not swayed. After days of intense testimony and deliberation, the verdict was delivered. Vanessa was found guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was harsh life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom as Vanessa's fate was sealed. As Vanessa began her life sentence, the reality of her situation set in. She had lost everything: her freedom, her relationship with Sarah, and any semblance of a normal life. The weight of her actions and the loss of Lexi's life were heavy burdens she would carry for the rest of her days. Sarah, though devastated by the loss of Lexi and the betrayal by Vanessa, tried to move forward with her life. She sought therapy and support from friends and family to help her process the trauma and rebuild her life. The gym, once a symbol of her happiness, became a place of healing, a place where she could reclaim a part of her life that had been marred by violence. The community struggled to come to terms with the tragedy that had unfolded. Lexi's death had left a deep scar, and the gym's reputation was forever tainted by the violence that had occurred within its walls. But amidst the sorrow and grief, there was a glimmer of hope. People rallied together to support each other, honoring Lexi's memory and working toward a future free from such senseless violence. As time went on, the story of Lexi, Vanessa, and Sarah became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the consequences of betrayal and the importance of seeking help. Before conflicts spiral out of control, the legacy of what had happened would remain, serving as a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the need for compassion and understanding.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.